As I was mentioning, I used a software called NetLogo to simulate the adoption decisions of consumers, and here you can see a sample of a screen for this software. So I will start discussing my results. First of all, I ran 1,000 experiments with different levels of broadcast influence, social influence, and the network density. In this graph, you can see three lines, each one referring to one of these variables, and the vertical axis refers to the number of periods. This is a number that it takes to reach 100 of diffusion of the reverse innovation. So as you can see in the blue line, the broadcast influence, and in fact all of the influences are at the level of 60 periods. That is, it takes 60 steps to reach full diffusion. And the most important variable you can see in the blue line is broadcast influence. That is, each incremental resource or money to broadcast influences decreases, in fact, the number of periods needed to reach 100 of diffusion of the research innovation. The second main influence in the developing country is the social influence, which is depicted in the red line. But the relative weight is very much smaller. And finally, in the green light, it refers to the network density. That is, as you can see, it's almost a straight line, which means that augmenting or increasing the network density does not have any effect in the number of periods to reach the maximum diffusion of the reverse innovation. Now I will jump to the developed country. In the developed country, you can see a similar pattern as the one we saw in the developing country. The main difference lies in the fact that for a developed country, only 300 consumers were modeled, which contrasts with the developing country in which I modeled 1,000. So that is to refer that a developed country is one-third the size of a developing country, which clearly resembles the population of countries. And the most important issue in this graph is that it takes 50 periods of time to reach maximum diffusion, which is different to the number of periods we saw for the developing country. That's the same manner, the most important influence is the broadcast influence, is the variable according to this model that is most important to decrease the number of periods needed to reach maximum diffusion. In the second place, social influences, which has a relative lower influence. And finally, the network density, which does not have any impact in the adoption decisions. So, what is similar and what is different between a developing country and a developed country according to these experiments? As I mentioned, in the developing country, the diffusion starts an average of 60 steps to reach the adoption of a reverse innovation by 1,000 consumers. And the second important issue is that as the broadcast and social influences were modeled, the broadcast has more weight on the adoption decision. And now, in the developed country, diffusion starts at an average of 50 steps to reach the adoption of 300 consumers. And similar, the broadcast has more weight in the adoption decision. For sake of comparison, I used the same network structure for both countries. Now, what are the implications for theory? These experiments have showed that diffusion patterns for reverse innovation are different across countries. So there are differences between a developed country and a developing country. Also, There is a differentiated weight of influences in adoption decision for each country. And now, the implications for practice. These results show that managers need to be aware that the same product has different speeds of diffusion. So this leads to the need that managers in multinational and even local companies use ambidextrous strategies that depends on the market size and features. And finally, one of the most important implications of this study is that in a developing study, 1,000 consumers are reached in 60 steps, whereas in a developed country, only 300 consumers are reached in 50 steps. That is an increase of 20% in time to leads to 200% more consumers in a developing country. So this is a very differentiated pattern for the diffusion of a reverse innovation. And just about to finish my presentation, the limitations of this study. I only included two influences of adoption, but there are many other influences at the market as the market characteristics or the consumer psychographic features that may be involved in the adoption decisions. I also simulated some market features and I modeled consumers in a social network, but more experiments are needed to include many external influences to the adoption decisions. So in this line, for the future research, I'd like to suggest to include spatial issues to refine the explanation of the adoption decisions. That is, I only included a developing country in an abstract way. In the same manner, I included a developed country in an abstract way. So there is a very interesting idea would be to put names to these developing and developed countries. And finally, as a future research, there is a need to calibrate the model's variables using another method that is grounded on the local characteristics of the consumers, and these perceptions and opinions may be gathered using conjoint analysis of partial least squares to include such consumers' perceptions in the adoption decision. So that's it for now, friends. I am very happy to present this paper, and in this slide I am including my email, so anyone interested in discussing the results and these presentations, can contact me in this email address. So thank you very much for your attention.